world surrounded by franchises, reboots, and shared universes. An elite team of podcasters will risk body and soul to investigate the depths of intellectual properties, one multiverse, subgenre, and trend at a time. Who are we? We're the IP Squad. Welcome back to the IP Squad, our ongoing investigation into the film adaptations of the work of Stephen King. I'm John Campbell, my partner on this investigation, Eliott Lewis.
Well, John, we got another call about a psychic teenage girl, but I gotta admit, I fell asleep at my desk on this one.
It's very hard not to.
Yeah.
Very hard not to. This is film Ambien, if I've ever seen it. Good Lord.
It was a rough one.
Hey, boy. So this is 2002's adaptation of Carrie, which I believe comes to us from the good folks at ABC once more. Is it not ABC?
Was it ABC or NBC? I thought I read NBC.
Well, it might have been NBC.
I also could be wrong.
Well, honestly, I don't know. There's not a lot of research to do on this. Okay,
not
produced
really.
by MGM, but that's not. It might have been. Hold on, it might have been MGM.
I'm just right because it's Brian Fuller. I just assume that he's just been in a closet at NBC this whole time.
Yeah.
And they just sort of let him out.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. NBC. That's a rare one, but yeah, that is. Man, I love Brian Fuller, and I can't really. He does what he does what he was assigned to, and I don't know how much you looked into the background of this at all.
Yeah, what I read a little bit of is like that it was half an attempt to remake the Brian De Palma film, which there is a lot of at least on paper, there's a lot of the De Palma film in here, not quite an execution, but
right.
But also there is a little bit of the kind of like investigative epistolary stuff from King's novel in it as well. But I don't know what the actual pitch meeting was.
So the idea was that I think my guess is based on, and this is my assumption here, but based on the success of a lot of the Stephen King TV stuff, they go, ooh, we should do Carrie. And then they went, well, wait a minute. They couldn't get, according to the Wikipedia for this, they couldn't get the green light to make this as a TV movie, but they said, well, now, but if we can sell it as a backdoor pilot for a Carrie TV show, then we're willing to make it. So that's why I say, like, Brian Fuller was brought in with a specific assignment, which is why this is maybe the worst thing I've seen that he's written. But it's like his assignment was remake Carrie, but also find a way to make it the springboard to a television show.
Which, again, there was a little bit. I did read a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Of what they were trying to do, but I can't even pretend to know what a Carrie TV show would have even been.
Yeah. Apparently the idea was kind of X-Files-y, where now Carrie and Sue Snell would drive around the country finding other people with abilities, and I'm like, that sounds horrible.
It just doesn't sound great.
No. And and it's so interesting too, reading comments from the people involved in this. A lot of it being Brian Fuller talking about I wanted to take this approach to Carrie, and what's a post-Columbine Carrie look like? Because he talked about it needed to be edgier because we know what violence in schools is like, and you're like, I don't really see that here.
No,
it's kind of just Carrie. Yeah. It's pretty. I have very similar reaction to this to the Shining miniseries, where you're like, well, everything from the book is in here, but it's just pretty boring.
Yeah, and yeah, it's odd because it does include like the biggest like kind of pop culture changes though that we're like pop culturally familiar with like it's not even pig's blood in the book.
Right.
So they're still drawing on this like cultural imagination of what De Palma's Carrie was, but also trying to like again, I don't see where it's edgier. I was reading Brian Fuller writing about like our Carrie is she's like a little edgier, but she's also nicer and I don't know. I don't get what he's trying to say about
if that was in his script,
Carrie.
If that was in his script, it did not come across on screen because I have his quote here. He says his Carrie's more edgy and wanted her to feel less like a victim. He says, this is Fuller talking. Carrie's not a murderer, and especially the way Angela portrays her, she is a sympathetic, sweet soul who is a bit more edgy than Sissy Spacek's Carrie. Sissy portrayed her as, I don't want to say pathetic, but just really as a victim. Angela gives the character such a strong core, and we felt that we couldn't turn this character who was so sweet into a murderer and then kill her. We wanted to give her another chance. We wanted to see her blossom and triumph over this instead of losing again. To which I would go, like, there's a lot. Number one, there's a lot.
There's a lot there.
But I would say just focusing on the last point is kind of like maybe then don't make Carrie. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of
I mean because I struggle with this because I will freely admit I just finished watching this movie.
Oh wow.
I watched it this morning.
Okay. I've had a little time to sit with it, but yeah.
I haven't had a lot of time to like chew on that because I also read that quote from Brian Fuller.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a ton of time to chew on that because I don't quite like the taste of it.
Yeah. Which is that's why I'm so bummed by this because like he's a guy who I'm usually like his take on stuff. Like his Hannibal show, fucking amazing. And latched on to things that were missing from the other Hannibal adaptations and things like that. He really brought something new to it. But here it sounds like if that was his mindset, he did not succeed in that on this.
No. And I mean, look, that was 2002.
Yeah.
So clearly in the, God, what would that have been? Like 15 years between that and Hannibal?
Yeah.
Thereabouts?
Yeah. He got better. There's no question.
Better.
At this point, he's coming off of being like a Star Trek staff writer. So like, he's not yet the Brian Fuller, because I think after this is when he does Dead Like Me, his show about Grim Reapers, and then Pushing Daisies, which kind of got him a huge like cult fan base. And I don't know if you've seen his Munsters reboot pilot, 1313 Mockingbird Lane. It's really good, actually. It's like one of those things where like, why didn't they pick this up? I guess because it was just too weird. NBC has a weird relationship with him where they like his stuff, but also go like,
he just sort of sits in a storage closet, and they let him out every once in a while when they're feeling like it.
Yeah, and then they're like, they give him total creative freedom, and then go like, oh no, people don't want this. Is so weird. Like, I am excited. He's doing a series right now for I think Amazon. He's doing a documentary series about queer horror, which I'm very curious to see. And he's also been for the past couple of years working on a new Christine movie.
Oh, that's right.
Which Christine is a book where I love the John Carpenter movie, but there's so much more in that book than is in that movie. So you could make a new Christine that feels totally different. So I think that's this though is just such a losing proposition because the overwhelming. I was also reading as with like The Shining and stuff like that, like some of the poll quotes from like TV Guide at the time, and this was met with almost unanimous vitriol of like, what are you doing? Why even greenlight this? And that and also spoiler for both this week and next week, that is Uncle Stevie's opinion of like his attitude is basically just like, why are you doing? I already said I thought the De Palma version actually improved on my novel or was the better summation of my novel. So what are you trying to accomplish? And as you're saying, which is true, pop culturally, it's so ubiquitous. It's one of the most iconic horror movies ever.
I mean, and we've talked about this in other shows that I have guested on, but
Hmm.
it kind of is the same thing with Jaws a little bit. Like we've talked about,
Yes.
like every animal based a movie where an animal goes around and kills people. It's
Yeah.
just a Jaws movie,
Yeah.
whether it knows it or not. And
Right.
some are better at rolling with that punch than others. And
Totally.
it's like, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just sort of how it is now because Jaws is also this very ubiquitous pop culture reference. It's kind of a little bit the same with Carrie. I mean, so much so that last week, The Rage Carrie 2
Hmm.
started out as probably just started out as a psychic teenager getting revenge and got
Yeah.
terrified because that's what a psychic teenager is.
Yeah. And you could feel that being massaged into that. And yeah, even this where it's setting out to be like, well, it's actually closer to the novel. And then it's interesting that it still can't, as you're saying, can't escape things that are in that movie because that's just what Carrie has become. The novel
Yeah.
is, I'm not going to say superfluous because it's still, great and popular. But like, yeah, when people say Carrie, everybody goes, "Oh, Sissy Spacek in that bloody dress." Like
Yeah.
that's what the action figure is. That's what the posters are. That's what the cosplay is. It's too iconic. And here, it's just that. It's just that, but longer and boring.
Yes.
It doesn't
Like
have any of the.
you're just waiting for
Yeah,
the blood, the dress, the
and it
you know
takes forever.
it takes so
I
it's way too
I
long.
paused it so I could see. They don't even start coming up with the prom plan until an hour into this thing.
Yeah.
Is when Chris starts talking about it. And that's another thing too that was we talked about this way back on our first episode. That Carrie is actually one of King's slimmer books in general, and De Palma really turned it into this really well paced,
Like efficient
yeah.
engine of a story.
yeah, like a 95-minute just perfectly structured thriller. Because he's one
And
of
I had
the
to wake up early to watch this morning.
'Cause this
it's
thing-
2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, it can't hold that because what you see is much like and that's why I say it's similar to The Shining, though of course not as impossibly long as that 3-part
Yes.
thing. But similar to that, I just go, oh, I see, I see why De Palma and his screenwriter on that cut a lot of the stuff because you do go, oh, when you put everything in here, there's so many extraneous things where you're like watching this movie and just going, this point has been made. We've seen this scene. We get it. They're being mean to Carrie again. Okay, she's also an outsider here. Okay, it's this. And you're like, and do I need more of the principal and the gym teacher? No, I don't. It's like, and yet where they choose to focus is like, there's like a little bit more about the Chris and Billy relationship. But not that much more, and it's if anything, it's not really any more complicated.
And they don't use that time to like really dive into because like in the De Palma film, like I think that they do a pretty again efficient job of like these two people are clearly assholes,
Yeah,
and they're just feeding into the worst parts of each other. Like
right.
they do that pretty efficiently. It doesn't take that long to figure that out. And in the book, it gets a little deeper into, I mean, just how awful they are, I guess.
And sort of, there's a little bit more coloring
Steve loves to do that.
He does, and Steve also loves, which that definitely is. There's definitely more coloring of an abusive relationship.
Yes.
And here,
they do not use the extra time they have to do anything like to show any more of anything deeper with them.
Right.
It's really still just stays pretty surface level. So having a ton of time with them, it doesn't do anything for the story.
I also think and this is something that was brought up, and we'll get to I read through, as I'll read a couple user reviews at the end, but I was reading through, and what a lot of people bring up, and is correct, there's a lot of miscastings in this. Like a lot of the particularly the side characters are weirdly cast. I would say particularly the male characters are all really bad choices. They're not necessarily bad actors, but they don't stand out in the way that like William Catt and John Travolta did, because they're not, they have probably the least screen time, the male characters. But like those guys, those were good actors who found something to make their characters like resonate in a couple scenes. And here, Billy and Tommy might as well be the same guy. Like they are both so bland and TV. These are TV guys.
Yeah, which like, right? It's not a
Cat.
Max is finally allowed back in my room, so he's being a bit of a pill.
He's like, finally, and he's got to get his opinion.
The cone's off. You can pay attention to me again.
Yeah,
cause mischief.
Yep. Yeah. So the guys in this we were talking about that they're
It's and also wow. I mean, we talked last week about a bunch of 30-year-olds in high school.
Yeah,
man, Tommy is another teacher. Like
100%.
He was fully 27 years old when this TV movie came out.
Yep. And you can see. I mean, because look, I was looking at his IMDb because he's one of those guys who like registered visually for me, but not from anything.
Yeah.
He's another guy, like we talk about being TV. It's like, I know you from TV. And I go through and it is like, oh yeah, it was like Stargate. He was in like some episodes of Stargate and then Battles. There's a lot of Battlestar Galactica people in this because it's Vancouver. I was
gonna say that's a Vancouver
that's because our Sue Snell in this is in like a ton of Battlestar Galactica. So that was immediately.
Even I've never seen Battlestar Galactica, and I even recognized her from being in Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, she's like one of the main people in that. This guy's only in like 5 episodes, but still, I am like, I know you from TV. But he was in. It's another thing where I was talking about like how long people play kids for. We talked about this movie a little bit last week because it's very much in the Rage era. He's in Disturbing Behavior with James Marsden, but that's a good 4 years before this, and he's still the window that these people who play high schooler for like 10, 12 years, and you're just like, dude, you're 40.
40.
And he's just he's got a weird energy. He doesn't read. William Catt really played and it's one of those things where you just go like, once again, I'm doing it because you can't not. The first movie's so iconic. I've seen it so many times. But he really did play this like handsome jock guy who's kind of nice though. Like he's the and it comes through. This guy is nice because the script is telling me to, but he's just so bland. And
he's just sort of he's just there.
Yeah. It's really interesting. We'll talk, of course, about some of the bigger characters. And then the guy who plays Billy is such a non-presence. And Billy's not a huge character, of course, but once again, that was why De Palma was really smart to cast somebody like John Travolta, who you're just drawn to. He's just charismatic and captivating.
Yeah.
This guy, though, I mean, this guy barely did anything. This actor who played. I mean, aside from once again Vancouver and King Connection, he did do an episode of the Dead Zone TV show. Because
I always forget they made a TV show out of that. I don't know.
And it was like,
was it good?
It was all right. I mean, it took a route that you could easily do, where you just go like, oh, if he just kept using these powers to solve crimes, it was all right.
He does in the book. Like there's a huge swath in the book where he just like is just traveling around. Like that's an easy expansion to make. It's like, worked. I mean, what was Johnny doing before he did the whole political
and I haven't seen the show like since it was on. I mean, they made 6 seasons. It was a hit. But if I remember, 6
seasons and a movie, but in reverse.
Yeah, movie and then 6 seasons. Yeah. If I remember, though, the whole senator thing is like seeded as the ever ongoing plot.
Yeah.
And then it's case of the week. But I remember it being all right. I haven't seen it forever though, so like, if anybody goes like, I took your recommendation, I'm like, my memory from the early 2000s was pretty good. So yeah, let's talk. Well, let's just talk about Carrie in this. Let's talk about Angela Bettis's performance as Carrie. Okay, so Angela Bettis, who once again, like a lot of people in this, are working actors. I recognize some of them. She's another person where I'm like, I feel like I've seen this face before. but I couldn't place what from, and I still don't fully know. Once again, I think just kind of TV.
I also kept meaning to look this up because I thought that I did know, but I didn't want to like say anything and be wrong. Okay, yeah, I was completely wrong. I was like, is she also the weird religious chick in Orange is the New Black? But she's not.
Oh, yeah, but she does have that look. But like, yeah, I mean, because when I'm looking, I'm going like, what do I know her from? It's like, oh, like One House, Two Dexters, One Criminal
Criminal
Minds.
Minds.
Yeah, and so you're like, okay, yeah. You've been on like shows I've watched for like one episode. Okay, that's why your face just looks familiar to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. According to this, looking at her biography, she also this same year was on Broadway as Abigail in The Crucible. So you're like, oh, so like I see that, like, because
Yeah.
similar to Sissy, I will say this is her casting is not a problem because she does kind of unlike once again I haven't seen it, so but what I expect, at least my initial reaction to the Chloe Moretz casting is like that's just not the look I want for a Carrie. Similar, this woman Angela Bettis, much like Sissy Spacek, is pretty, but in sort of an otherworldly kind of way, and there is sort of a removal, and so and so I do think like visually, I get that. I feel so bad for this actress in this because regardless of the script and whatever edginess Fuller is trying to put in there, you're always fighting the shadow of Sissy Spacek's performance in this, right? And so everything you do is either a rejection or an embracing of everything Sissy Spacek did, and you can really feel that. I could feel her struggling to play scenes because of that.
Yeah, I think that because I was reading that like basically the overarching review of this TV movie was that it wasn't very good, but she and
Patricia Clarkson,
the actress, Patricia Clarkson were really good,
and I think they are. I think they are far and away the standouts in this thing. And actually, their scenes together, I think, are really good because that is something you get more of than the De Palma movie, and it's actually good. And it is the one time that they're doing what we were talking about, where it's like that is the interesting new wrinkle you can focus more on, and it works. And Patricia Clarkson is like the name in this; she's like the revered actor that's in this thing. One could argue she's slumming it by being in this, really. You know? But she's doing a great job.
Definitely not phoning it in. Like, she's working.
And their stuff is great together.
I do think that their scenes together were really like you can really feel that like they are acting off of each other. Like there is a dialogue, which is not really something that's present throughout the rest of the movie.
No, anytime they're in it, it does like all of a sudden there's an energy, and it's like I'm just going like, did you two like get together and rehearse this, and nobody else did? Because like what you don't get that De Palma I think does an amazing job of in his movie, which is like once again it's like hot take, that movie's fucking great, and De Palma directed the shit out of it, but like. What you don't get as much in this is that clique of mean girls. I don't feel them as a unit. You really feel like Carrie is against this popular pod of people in that. And what we talked about him and Lucas auditioning people for Star Wars and Carrie, and he just picked each one of those girls so perfectly. And so even though they don't have much like dialogue or whatever, they all individually have personality while also working as this group. And here, even though I think actually these are all good actors, like Emily DeRaven and Catherine Isabel, who is the one thing Fuller clearly like took and then put Catherine Isabel in Hannibal as well. And she's a favorite over on my podcast Meet the Monsters because of the Ginger Snaps movies. Yeah. She's fucking great in those. With our pal Emily Perkins from It, who was Beverly in that. They're the two sisters in the Ginger Snaps movies, which are great. But once again, you're just going like, but they're just not as defined here, and they don't cohere as a group the same way they did in that original.
No, this could be like because it's TV budget, but
Yeah.
like they really went all in with, I mean, differentiating Sue and Christine
Mm-hmm.
as the kind of like, or Chris,
Yeah.
as the two. They call her Christine a lot in this
They
movie,
do.
which is weird.
Yeah, because I
Um,
also she's always Chris in
yeah,
the De Palma movie, and that's how I remember her from
and
the
they never
book.
call Sue Susan, so
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
weird like I don't understand what the like what the choice was there. Anyway, so they really like set Sue and Chris apart, both, like as the in casting, like Chris is very like, the it's 2002, so self-tanning wasn't like super huge yet. So
Right.
we're still coming off the pale 90s. So like she's
Yeah.
like got the round face, she's really sweet, she's the perky blonde.
Mm-hmm.
She, wears weird like popular girl outfits. Like her styling is very clear. And then Sue is also very clear. I don't remember anybody's name. Who was that actress's name again?
Oh, who played Sue?
Yeah.
Candace McClure.
Candace McClure. She has such a distinct look.
Yeah.
And like even without like styling, like you could I don't even remember half the stuff she wore, but she has such a distinct look
Yeah.
that like, okay, yeah, these two characters very firmly like are characters. Like they
Yes.
don't blend into the background. And I think unfortunately the rest of the clique, styling wise,
Yeah.
definitely suffers from that. Couldn't tell you who Norma was because she wasn't wearing a hat the whole time. And as dumb as that was, it worked.
It was something. It was anything. And that was why
something.
We talked about that. That was literally just she wore that hat to the audition. De Palma was like, wear that in every scene. Because I think he was a filmmaker thinking about iconography. And yeah, it's
and what's her face had the huge glasses. Definitely can, pick her out in every scene.
Yeah.
But like the rest of these girls don't really have any like distinguishing characteristics. I will say Tina did the most for me.
Yeah.
And I can tell you which one she was because the gal who played her was like made character choices, which is another thing you can do to stand out if you don't have great styling.
That's Catherine Isabel. That's Catherine Isabel, who I fucking love, man. She's so good. And she does make the most of every single line they give her. And you are and so you can totally see why Fuller's like gonna remember her and put her in the back pocket for something. And then she's awesome on Hannibal as Mason Verger's sister. In his weird.
That is who she is.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing it now. She's just like everybody who isn't, the female characters all look like they could realistically be in high school. Everybody does look quite young.
Because they are all younger. Like,
okay.
I mean, Angela Bettis is 19 when this comes out, and Emily DeRaven, who plays Chris, is she's 20. Was she 21 in this? Like, I mean, they're younger. They're on the younger side, and that works. And I agree about Candace McClure. Just stands out because when you talk about, even though you haven't seen Galactica, you remember her. It's like, because on the poster she stands out. Her eyes are so captivating. And that's one thing where it's like, I don't actually know if she's a good choice for Sue, but she's certainly very captivating. Like, she's certainly watchable.
Yeah, but I would love to know like the casting choice, like the casting process of this, because, and again, just much like last week, only one black character in this whole thing.
Yeah. And it does feel like colorblind incidental casting, right? Or it's just.
I will say though, like, I had a thought, and again, I don't know if this is true, but like I was like, okay, well, what could be like if I were to, write a fucking lit paper, an analysis paper of this, like having Sue be black mixed, like maybe that makes sense as to why she kind of becomes more sympathetic to Carrie, like because she is like, we know in coming from a predominantly like white suburban neighborhoods, both of us, and white suburban cities and whole state, it is very
Yeah.
easy to be like a step away from being an outcast
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
if you're not white.
Well, and that's a thing where it's one of those things where and that's what I was saying. Like, it feels like that incidental colorblind casting where actually there was an opportunity to do a rewrite and maybe explore some of that, and it's just like, no. You're like, well, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't, right? It didn't happen, but like that could be an interesting thing to do.
Yes, and maybe in that imaginary TV show that existed, they
delved more into that.
Oh god, that would have lasted 6 episodes and been terrible.
Yeah.
God, I can't even imagine how bad that would have been. But so yes, we talked about that. Another real TV person who once again was on so many shows is Rena Sofer, who plays the gym teacher in this, Miss Dojen.
Yeah. I swear, yeah, she was like an NCIS or something, right?
Oh god, had to be, right? Yeah, I mean, once again, like, it's all the same. Yeah, 6 episodes of NCIS is exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah. And like a Criminal Minds, a Monk, a Bones. You know, I mean, she's just one of those TV faces. Yeah, you know, these people who just have these careers where it's just like, yeah, what are the procedurals? I'm just gonna do one of each. You know, it's like, yeah. And it's because she's good. You know, she's fine in this. There's more for this character to do, but once again, I'm not sure what is gained from that. And then you get David Keith as police detective guy.
Oh my god.
How you doing? I'm police detective guy.
Have one of these donuts.
Yeah.
They're hot right now. Like, who is this?
David Keith is just a guy who has played a billion cops in every movie because he reads as that, but you're just like, God, very little. By the most of his most recent career is doing Christian stuff, and he apparently was the one who told Brian Fuller, "Hey, maybe you could put in a little dialogue that not all religion's so bad."
Oh.
Yeah, he was like, "Your script is good, but a little rough on religion there."
And it's like, hey, have you read Carrie?
Or, as we brought up, any Stephen King thing where he just rails against organized.
You know this man?
Yeah, I know, it is sort of like, if you're a Christian, probably not then, actually, because it's just like a guy, he's just like, well, you believe in Jesus? That's stupid. Is this attitude?
Are you an idiot?
Yeah. In
but
fact,
also, I will use the concept of God, but like not the way you do it.
No, you're still wrong. Yeah, there's a God.
Still stupid and wrong,
but you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's a turtle. No. I think a lot of what we're also reacting to does come from director David Carson, who is just TV to his bones.
Yeah.
It is. This is a guy who has. I mean, he goes back to the early '80s and has directed so much TV. I know him specifically because he did a lot of Star Trek, including directing the first Next Generation movie. But like, yeah, he's also directing on Smallville at this point, and I
did see that.
And you're like, that so Reed. So I just don't think this is a guy who he's just here because the network knows he can bring it on time and on budget. And his directing feels like that, right? There's no passion. There's no sense of like, oh, we could really do something with this. Which I think will be interesting to compare him to Karen Kusama, who directs the 2013 remake, where I'm actually disappointed because she was somebody who I was a fan of, and still am, but coming into that and just being like, well, why are you doing this? You're like somebody with vision. So I'm very curious, actually, to see that movie next week. But here's a guy who's just going to be like, yeah, we got it.
Yeah, like the most stylistic choice we're going to make is Dutch angles and not holding the camera steady.
Yeah.
And I don't love that.
No.
This makes it hard to watch.
This whole thing is, I mean, not only is it so, the second it started, I'm like, oh God, it's TV budget. But just the approach to the lighting, everything about it is so just not fun to look at.
And like, right, we've seen several TV movies in this season that actually don't look that bad. I mean, the It miniseries like had
Really
lots
good.
of good like lighting choices and framing choices, and even as meh as the as Mick Garris's Shining is overall. I mean,
That
Mick
is
Garris can direct
yes.
a movie.
There is a sense of this is a guy who wants to be directing this. Both of those have a passion behind them, even if they are
Yes.
limited by their budgets. This is a guy who's just on total autopilot, who's just like, sure, that's a gig.
A
And
gig is a gig is a gig. Is a
yeah, I
gig.
mean that's clear. Like there's no consistency in like
Mm-mm.
the stuff he directed. Like he goes from 90210 to Next Generation to you're just going like he was just a guy clearly who's just like, where do you need me? Where do you need a guy? Oh man, I remember this. This was big. He's coming off of probably some heat of this. Do you remember the miniseries The 10th Kingdom
No.
from 2000? This was like a big NBC, like NBC put a lot of money into a 10-part fantasy miniseries. And I remember my sister in particular being real. And it was one of those things where it's like, what if in modern day New York City there was Cinderella and Snow White and Robin and all the fairy tale characters lived in the world and we just don't know it?
And then ABC, 15 years later, was like, that's actually a good idea. And since we own Disney,
Let's make 8
we're going to
seasons
turn
of
this into a cash cow.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, it was one of those things. But I do remember that. There's no way I watched the whole thing, but I remember it getting so much promotion because I was like the NBC event. So he's probably coming off of that because that was 2000.
Yeah.
2002, he also directs an episode of the Witchblade television series, a not good show based off of a not good comic book. So, yeah. So I mean, yeah, they picked the blandest, most forgettable director to do this, and it shows. Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. I think that comes from the casting as well, where it's probably a lot of these people are just people that NBC liked. Here are people we're maybe thinking about putting in shows. Because, like, I mean, it's not on NBC, but, like, a couple years later, Emily DeRaven, who plays Chris in this, will be on Lost. It's like, here are people who are probably going to be on TV shows going forward. And, of course, Candace McLaren's up on Battlestar Galactica. Like, it sort of feels like these are the people pick from this pool of people who we've already kind of scouted, is the sense I got of the casting in this.
Yeah.
These are future stars.
And like we said, some of them end up shining, and some of them don't.
Yeah. You're right. I'm looking at the cast list, and I'm looking at the photo of the girl who plays Norma in this. I even though I just watched this yesterday, I swear I've never seen this woman before.
Yeah. And I think that I still can't tell you the answer to this, which is why I'm going to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
Did they make Norma the girl who was the class president, or was that a different person altogether? I don't know.
I actually don't know either. I could not tell you. I don't know.
I don't know.
I will say this: the woman who played Norma in this also did the voice of Rogue on X-Men Evolution, the animated series. So that's a better gig. Hey, that's pretty good.
Love that show.
Yeah, I watched all of that, of course. Put that in my veins. So this Carrie version, I'm trying to think like what. So of course, the other thing, and a lot of people bring this up, hampered by being a network thing, right? You just couldn't get as. And it's not even. This is something I also think about a lot when people talk about TV or network or family-oriented stuff or anything like that. Where they want to bring a rating down. It's not always the actual like violence or sexuality. It's a lot of it is just like subject matter. There's just an inherent lack of horror. For sure, this thing is not remotely scary.
No.
And it's. Like we were saying, it's boring a lot of the time, and I think that comes from that sort of network restrictions of not the actual content itself, but just the vibe of it.
Yeah, I don't know, because like I think some of the feeling boring definitely comes from like just how long certain bits of it are drawn out. unnecessarily.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, the first hour of this thing is interminable, almost. Really,
Yeah.
it's so slow, and especially for something where we all know where it's going. Not only have you read the
that's
book, but we all know the movie, and the movie that's famous for its ending. You know, like
Yeah. That's because that's the other thing, right? Is like I part of at some point in this movie, I was kind of sitting there like, okay, what do you do when you are remaking something that is so ubiquitous, so well known? Like,
yeah,
it is hard to imagine coming to this story for the first time.
right.
And I'm trying to put like, what if this is my first experience with this story, like, what do I take out of that? Like, what am I getting out of this? And what do you do to try to have people get something out of this when it is so ubiquitous? And clearly, like, well, not clearly. I hate being like that because, like, listen, all these people are way more successful.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I'm just some dumb shit sitting in my bedroom complaining about it. But
Sure,
but
yeah.
like, it's hard to like see that any of that was maybe thought about, because, like, I don't know. I feel like this is kind of an approach that isn't taken with this kind of stuff where, we were remaking this, but like, why? I don't know. I feel like the why question is not asked enough.
Oh God, yeah. Well, and that because that's
Which is, again, also not a hot take.
No, but it's a thing where, say what you will about the Shining miniseries, that did have reason to exist.
Yeah.
And it was the vision was clear. So even though it's like, oh God, that movie is just as ubiquitous and just as iconic, at every turn they were going, well, we're not doing that though. We are doing the book. But it's like, yeah, when you literally have material where the actual author is going, actually the movie's a better version of this anyway, then what are you going to do? And like we're saying, you can hew closer to the book, which they do, but also they don't. But also the movie,
because there is so much of the De Palma film in this.
Yeah,
and like the example that I go back to is, well, I mean, The Shining is a really good example of it, especially because we're talking about Stephen King this season. But like something like the Psycho remake, which also sucked, but like, there was a reason to remake that. Like, filmmaking techniques have been updated and, all this stuff. But like,
putting it in color automatically
putting it in
like
color, it's just different. Yeah. But like with this, like, what angle would you even try to go at, 30 years later? Almost.
Well, one of the interesting things about it, and I think we kind of talked about this when we talked about the first movie, and this really brought this up, is it's even setting it, 30 years later, whatever, or 20, however many years later, it's actually not that different. Like, aside from a scene of her using the internet.
Yeah, instead of a library. Oh my God. Oh no. Fake person who knows about how research used to be done. Using the index cards.
Yeah,
right?
using exactly. Yeah, instead of that, she uses it. But like, it doesn't really feel like, oh, this is so modern. Like I said, when Fuller's talking about not just the edginess, but it's like, this is a Carrie for a post-Columbine world. You're like, I don't feel that, and I don't even know what that means, because also, like, what does that mean? Carrie's gonna use a gun now? I don't, what? Yeah, and I said it pains me because I respect Brian Fuller so much, but I'm just reading interviews from this time. You're just like, dude, you're just talking. Like, I don't know. I think so. I think he's almost trying.
As my mom would say, you're just talking to keep yourself warm.
There absolutely is that. It does feel like he's almost going like, maybe I can maybe if I say enough, I can justify this to myself. Because I have to clearly. And I know because he comes on the King cast all the time, and he's a huge fucking nerd, and he loves Stephen King. But like, clearly this was like a gig for him, and he's just starting out at this point. So, but yeah, it is just going like, well, my Carrie's edgy, and you're like,
is she though?
Like, maybe a little bit more than Sissy
Yeah, she
Spacek.
definitely gets angrier more than Sissy Spacek.
And I think that's
I don't
where
know if that makes her edgy.
No, and I think the relationship with her mother that we've talked about, some of the stuff that works in here, she goes to a different place only because there's more time to it. So her sort of asserting her strength in that relationship does maybe have slightly more impact than but I wouldn't say that makes her edgier. It's just we have more time to build that arc of the sort of reversal of power in that relationship.
Yeah.
But it's just. And I think actually in times, and I think a lot of this is honestly on Carson, the director, more so than Bettis. There are times though where it's like her outcast status is almost like she's an alien, like she's inhuman in a way that didn't work for me in several, especially early on. They have her so unable to communicate, which of course is still not as far as King goes in his book. I mean, that's the other thing too, is this is still not King's Carrie. No movie actually portrays a Carrie as she is in the book. And I think that's probably for the best, because I mean, we talked about in that book, King is just like, she's disgusting, like, which he's doing on purpose. I mean, like,
right, like,
yeah, but he just yeah. I mean, I'm not here to bash on King for that necessarily, but it's so purposely egregious.
Yeah, there's a lot of vitriol in the text for Carrie, and I don't want to like get onto my like soapbox about storytelling and tragedies,
but you are actively climbing on a soapbox right now to say this,
yeah. Get the spray bottle.
Yeah,
I'm getting on the soapbox.
Yeah.
I just it is more interesting because so the thing we're not dancing around because it hasn't even come up, but Carrie doesn't die in this one. She lives.
That's the biggest thing.
That's kind of the biggest thing. She lives. Just because it was supposed to be a backdoor pilot,
right?
Which again, ill-advised.
And it's thank God, really, that show didn't exist, or we would have like 6 episodes of a thing like, God, remember when they tried to do that Carrie show? Ugh.
Yeah. But the problem with that is, and this was what I had trouble chewing on with Fuller's quote about like, well, it didn't seem fair to, kill her in the end. I struggle with that so much because it really just pulls the teeth out of the whole thing. Yeah. Because Carrie is, thank you, son. Carrie is it's a tragedy. Yes. It is tragic that this girl who is kind of beaten down her whole life, is an outcast, that she finally has a moment of triumph and it is all taken away and she lashes out at the world and then dies. It's tragic. Yes. And I get the same way when people are arguing about Midsommar, and I'm like, they're like, it's girl power. No, it's not feminist. I'm like, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, yes. That's true.
Read a book.
That also is a thing that frustrates me when people can't hold like contradictory themes in the same context, where you're like, it can be both things, right? It can be tragic with elements of feminism in it as well, or whatever, right? Like, you just go like, oh, everybody can be in a weird place of good and bad, or right and wrong, and some of the most fascinating stuff. Agreed.
Yeah. So that was kind of, aside from it being very boring, was kind of my biggest issue with the film as a whole.
I did not know that going. Did you know that was the difference? Because when that happened, I was like,
no,
the fuck.
I mean,
so I did not know that. So that was a complete shock to me when all of a sudden Carrie's alive at the end of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You started to see that was where he was going with it?
Yes. Yeah. I watched enough stupid cop shows to see that twist coming a mile away.
Oh man, I just didn't. Yeah, well, I didn't know it was a backdoor pilot. I didn't know anything like. And obviously, you got to take some of Fuller's comments at the time with a grain of salt because he is trying to sell the show as well, right? Like,
yeah.
Because it is sort of a thing where you go like, but yeah, when he's just going like, just seems so cruel, and you're like, yeah,
it is pretty cruel.
It's true.
What can we learn? What can we learn from that, Brian?
He said he initially considered.
What can we learn from a story like that, Brian? That's so cruel.
And you would think a guy who's like a big horror nerd and stuff would get that. But the other thing
he did eventually.
He did. He definitely did. I mean,
lots of people die in Hannibal in very cruel ways, Brian.
Oh God, yeah, yeah, really bad. That's the thing, though. The thing I would say about that is also, so apparently Fuller did briefly consider still having Carrie die, but having Sue get telekinetic powers, and the show would have been about her.
I read that too.
But then that's when he was like, yeah, but I just couldn't do that to a woman who'd been victimized so much, and he's kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure that's the feminist take you. I don't think that's it is
that you think it is.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's and it just robs the whole. The other thing it does is so much of what works about both the novel and the De Palma film is there is this tragic structure of this inevitability to this whole thing where you're just going like, oh God, you're both, you want to see what's going to happen, but you're dreading to get there, which is so great. And that's what's so interesting about De Palma also like makes moments last for a long period of time in the movie, but this is just doing that with poor structure where he is building dread. And once again, I know there's another thing where it's like, I know, but I'm of two minds because it's like not fair. I'm comparing TV director David Carson to like one of the masters of thrillers, but at the same time, he's asking for it. Yeah,
they decided to essentially remake the De Palma film.
Yeah,
so that's you're gonna do that on a TV budget.
Yeah,
and with a.
Well, and then what I think is interesting
different
is
kind of director than
what is so interesting, and this is something I was also watching this because I just in the beginning of it, the first sort of section of it, and going, wow, this is so TV. I'm like, I wonder what they're going to do at the ending because De Palma didn't have the money in a studio movie to do the ending of the novel, and they kind of try to have their cake and eat it too. Is basically how they do the ending of this, and that's when this thing becomes laughably bad with 2002 TV CGI. The other thing is the like meteor shower that lands on the house.
Oh God,
it's just like
it's like that's one of the things from the book that like doesn't really need to be in a film retelling either.
That's where I was thinking about The Shining, the Mick Garris Shining, right? Because you're just going like, yeah, I understand this is from the book. I know that's in the book, man. Like, but. It's the same thing. That was where I was going to bring up the structure, using the structural thing of the book. Although they kind of, once again, like in the book, it's the whole like the white incident, right, and stuff like that. And it's kind of shadowy government. It's kind of laying the seeds for the Institute kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas here, it's just like, yeah, I'm a dumb cop from this area going, what the fuck happened at prom night?
Prom night. Everything was not all right.
Basically, yeah. Just like, did you see Jamie Lee Curtis on prom night? Oh no, wait.
They said prom night so much that I did at one point. It was like,
yeah,
I just want to watch prom night now.
Yes, well, because prom night's fun. This is not, and this is
a good movie.
This is not. This is just not fun. Yeah.
No.
And yeah, but yeah, I also. And what about Mary Lou? Did she show up?
I would love to watch prom night too.
An insane, truly one of the most insane horror movie sequels. And someday,
wop bop a loop bop a wop bamboo indeed.
Oh God, it's so crazy. It's so like the first movie is. Oh, anyway, I'll save that for when we eventually. I swear, someday we're gonna get to meet Campbell and Jones meet the slashers, and we will do the prom night movies. Because
and I will be there for him.
Oh yeah.
Even the third one, which sucks very badly.
Well, that whole Meet the Slasher series will be a lot of good that turns into something that sucks real bad for almost every one of those franchises. But no, but instead King is doing this thing in the book where every time they cut to these sort of interviews with people, it is you as a reader are going like, well, Jesus, what happened? And in this, these just kill the pacing of this. Every time they cut to cheap, even by TV cop show standards, interview sequences, and this, David Keith, who's like a totally generic actor who I've seen in a million things, but also he's so bored in this, has no character to play other than I'm a cop asking questions. It's just dead. And for a second, for a large stretch of it, they're only talking to Sue, and I thought, Jesus, is this just going to be Sue?
I was gonna bring that up too, because they interview Sue like I think 3 times before they bring in anyone else.
Yeah.
And that is just like, okay, so you've completely like messed up with the like perceived like structure that this is going to take.
Right.
Because if it was just Sue, I don't think I would have really liked that either, but like it would have been a consistent choice.
Right.
Like if they were to do something like they did, it would mean more to start out with like showing everybody.
Yeah.
Like at various stages of the introduction to this interview. Like that's a pretty classic way to set up that kind of story, like storytelling structure.
And like it is in the book, by talking to all these people, you get the sense of like, oh my God, this whole town was affected by this massive event. But yeah, it's all just Sue. And then then when they do start adding in other people later in the film, you're like, whoa, what? Who's this now?
They show the Jackie guy before he was ever part of the story, and I'm like, who's this clown?
Yeah, and that's like, once again, like an hour into this thing, and you're all of a sudden going like, Jesus, what perspective do we need from you, man? It's weird. There's just a lot of weird, bad choices. It could have worked.
Like, that's the thing, is like, I don't think that this could have been good without some like major rewrites, but like I don't know, there's a lot of little things that could have made it at least like watchable,
or could have at least put at least like, where's, as we're talking about, like, where's the stamp that's like, this is our own. That's really all I'm hoping for out of the 2013 movie, is like, I'm just hoping for some filmmaking approaches that at least like identify it. From what I've seen, I don't have high hopes, because it does seem like, once again, imagery is very De Palma centric. Another Brian Fuller quote here that I also want to push back on. Once again, I do hate bashing on this guy whose work almost outside of this I pretty much entirely love.
He's an artist. We're critiquing. We keep sandwiching it. He's done great things.
He has done great things.
There's some questionable shit in this one thing. Okay?
There is.
He has so much more money than us.
No, it's insane. Yeah, he's sitting on a pile of Hannibal money right now. Yeah.
And you know what? I gave him some of that. So.
And he deserved it, because Hannibal's.
And he deserved it.
Fucking amazing.
You know, my baby girls in that one. All of my baby girls who are men.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Middle aged.
Well, yeah. That Mads Mikkelsen, he's such a baby girl. No.
He is. He's so baby girl.
Yeah, I do love Mads Mikkelsen. But another quote he says is, De Palma's movie is a fairy tale. Mine is an epic.
Oh, right? I did.
What is he talking about?
Like,
are
you high?
Yeah, that is like, what happened, man? Yeah, did he get some sort of traumatic brain injury during the making of this? Because I don't know because weirdly, even though he's like doing more of the book, it feels so much more small scale than De Palma's movie, where De Palma's whole thing was to try to actually narrow the focus. It's yeah.
Do you mean hey Brian, do you mean that De Palma's was a fairy tale in that it was iconographic and very easy to digest and lasted a long time, and yours is an epic in terms that it's very long and nobody talks about it?
Well, and we were talking about savage. Anyway. But we were talking about that before. I didn't even know this existed until like a couple years ago. Actually, one of the first places I ever heard about this existing is in the documentary De Palma, where literally but De Palma talks about that. They talk about this in that documentary, where he said he was specifically talking about changing the death of Carrie's mother. And he goes, you make a lot. I think I mentioned this on the first episode, but this is what he was talking about. He goes, you make a lot of decisions as a filmmaker, and you second guess yourself. You go, was that the right decision? He goes, then I saw this TV miniseries that they did of Carrie, and they actually did the way Margaret dies in the book, and I went, oh no, I was right.
Yeah,
that was stupid and didn't play well on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, having Carrie do like a Mortal Kombat fatality on her mom was kind of dumb, yeah.
Especially because they go into terrible 2002 CGI of her like heart.
Yeah.
But I just love the idea that he just gets in. I just love the idea of De Palma sitting at home watching this and going, yeah.
Yeah, no. I didn't make no mistakes with Carrie.
No, perfect.
Right on the money. Great.
Honey,
Good job, Brian.
Honey,
Good
get
job,
in here.
Palma.
You got to get in here and see how bad this Carrie ending is.
Hey.
Yeah, check this out. Look at this. Isn't that stupid? Mine's so much better. 30 years later, I was proven absolutely right. I just love that. But yeah, that is such a weird thing to think of this as. Well, it creates this interesting thing. Whenever people talk about epic, it does sort of often mean like, do you just mean long? Is it just long?
Do you just mean long?
Because, like, I remember as being a young cinephile nerd and going, like, I got to see the epics. And then always going, like, these are actually really boring for being epics. You're like, Lawrence of Arabia, and this, I'm going to take flack for this, but, like, you could cut a lot of it. It's way too fucking long. There's great stuff in there. But it's also, like, 4 fucking hours. Like, just bring it down a little bit. Focus, man. Yeah, it was just like, I understand these movies, but yeah, that's very much what I felt about this. And it's an interesting thing because it's something that weirdly, I don't even think we really gave that much shit, but like Mick Garris, I don't think would say that.
No.
I don't think he has that, like, it's so interesting, the high flute nature of this. And I'm going to be, once again, really curious next week to talk about the 2013 movie and how they're going to talk about it. Because I don't think they're going to talk like this about it. I think there's going to be, I don't know, but it's so interesting that they took this attitude in this of going like, well, actually, we've rethought it now. And that's one of the, I hate when people do that. Instead of going like, well, we're going to take a different approach or something, it's just this like, upon reflection, Carrie's kind of stupid, right? Like...
Yeah, so like this will be the first movie that like I had any kind of like conscious awareness of like the marketing surrounding it.
Yes.
Because when this came out, I was 8.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing that's amazing to me is that's something else. Is the fact that I didn't know this is crazy because I was such a voracious like TV kid and watched all. This at no point cross my radar. And I think it speaks to, I think everybody, I don't even think NBC put a lot behind the promotion on this thing because I can't imagine they took a look at the cut of this and went, oh yeah, this is going to be big. I think it's more like, oh, God. Like, do you remember a couple years ago, NBC remade Rosemary's Baby as a multi-part thing?
No.
It's another thing where, once again, I think they did it and then went, just get that out there. It was like a 2-night movie event. It's another one where you're going, what are you doing? What in God's name are you doing? Or I guess in the case, what in Satan's name are you doing? Yes. But yeah, I just, some of these things are baffling to me. And yeah, it just feels like everybody is just, I feel like Brian Fuller even is like, can we go back talking about anything other than the Carrie remake I wrote? Like, this is such a blip in everyone's career. It's so weird.
Yeah. It's absolutely bizarre.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that... Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but sorry. I brought that up because, like, the difference is that, like, there was a whole... And I remember this. There was a whole, like, viral marketing attempt at a viral marketing campaign around this with, like... like trying to scare people with like fake telekinesis in like real, in cafes and shit.
Yes. Oh God, I'm so glad
Yeah.
that a lot of that stuff has gone away. There was a period of time when films they just went nuts with that shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Especially horror movies.
yeah.
Like,
Oh, big time. Yeah. Well, there was also, and actually, there's still a little bit of. I mean, a lot of that. I remember that in like the early to mid 2000s, there was also a lot of the quote unquote true story stuff. So then you'd get the like TV specials where it's like, actually, the Blair Witch or whatever. I mean, the Blair Witch, and actually, that's where we can trace a lot of that back to, because that was the movie that created that kind of buzz. But that kind of just happened with some minor sort of nudges from the people making it. Then when they, like anything, when they tried to actually cultivate that for other stuff, you're like, oh, God. Oh, no. Please don't.
yeah.
Yeah, I am.
And they tried to do that with like the Blair Witch, the third one that came out like in the last 10 years or whatever, because they like marketed it as a different movie, and then it was like, surprise, it's another Blair Witch movie.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No, it wasn't very good. I watched it.
I did not. I'm out after that. I did see Book of Shadows, and that was it. That was enough for me. Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows.
This is also very bad.
Very bad. That one I remember being like embarrassingly bad.
Yeah. There is a moment in Blair Witch, the I think 2015.
Yeah, I think in that classic reboot fashion, I think it was just called Blair Witch.
Yeah, it was just called Blair Witch.
Yeah.
But there was a moment in there where there was like some actually really good tension, because it was like holding on a shot, and I was like, whoa, hey, this is a departure. Like, this moment's pretty good. It turned out I had accidentally paused the movie.
Oh no.
I was like, oh no, that was me. That was my Blair Witch edit where I actually created some tension in the film. Good for me.
Release the Lewis cut.
Release the Lewis cut.
Yeah. Good Lord. Yeah, it's tough. It's always tough to it's tough to recapture them, and I think that's what we're saying. Is
that's kind of the thesis of at least this arc of episodes. Well, because the Carrie arc,
the Carrie arc, when our show got Carrified. No, because I think that's going to be interesting to see, because when we go forward to things like the It movies, it is like, oh well, yeah. As much nostalgia people have for that '90s miniseries, you're like, yeah, it didn't nail it.
No.
And De Palma did nail it on Carrie. And if anything, like even King was, it's like it kind of claimed it. Where it's like, Carrie is kind of De Palma's thing now. It taken from Stephen King, but he so translated. It's like it really has got to be ranked amongst the best film adaptations of a piece of literature, right? Like,
yeah.
In terms of translating from one medium to another, it so perfectly gets at the core of what that book is trying to say in a beautifully cinematic manner. It was just, it's an example of the exact right director with the exact right take. And it's something and we'll get to my much more defense of, I fucking love what Muschietti does with the It movies, and I will like go to bat for those when people have their issues with those. We'll get to that down the road, but that's why it is sort of just like, it's really. I think it's something that I've been talking to a lot of people about, the fact that like HBO Max is turning Harry Potter into this, and you're just going, and I've talked to so many people who are like diehard, who are just going like, what are they gonna do? It's gonna be this, right? It's just gonna be that thing, but longer. Yeah,
and I mean, I'm not the right person to ask about anything Harry Potter related, but like we know.
I missed that fan train myself. Whatever that was, I just was like, it could be, if anyone listens to the podcast, that my noted more accusations of my hatred of fantasy than my actually possessing hatreds of fantasy. I may have some issue with whimsy, though. Maybe actually more of what the reaction to that is. I sometimes, things that get a little too cute with that stuff, I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, very cute.
We should start a new show that's something like exposure therapy. John Campbell experiences whimsy, and I'm just gonna pick out a bunch of whimsical films, and I'm just gonna be like, okay, what about this? And I'm just gonna take notes on like the whole time. Just like,
is that a podcast or a psychological study? Explain yourself. You need the little half glasses on the bridge of your nose.
Yeah,
with
like,
the
okay, so what was it about Willow that just filled you with so much?
I do actually enjoy Willow. Like I said, I think it's greatly exaggerated, but once again, how can you not love Willow? It's got Val Kilmer with a sword. It fucking rules. But I do think I know. Like my sister though was like all aboard that train. So once again, like her just going like, those movies are the perfect encapsulation of the. I don't know what there is to, and that you just start to just go. Especially talking about it in the context of what the show is, the IP Squad, right? Mm-hmm. Watching this is fascinating because this is kind of just the beginnings of them just going, we have to make everything again.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Because this is a half. I think between this and what next week's episode is a big jump. Because this is like but we'll do it on TV. We're not really trying to come at it. Next week is actually where it's like we're going to try to take that thing and make the big budget. And I think that really was marketed more as this generation needs Carrie now.
Yeah, which does it?
Well, I think that's a thing that's changing as well because of things like streaming services. People can just watch the originals very easily, and it's proven when things like The Office or Friends are still like the most watched things on streaming service. You go like, yeah, I'm not sure there's an expiration date on stuff the way there used to be.
Yeah, I mean, they like. I don't know if it's still on. I think it did get canceled, but like and it's sort of different, but like the Perry Mason show where it was like pre-lawyer Perry Mason. It's like, oh no, you can just watch Perry Mason on Tubi if you want. I am personally keeping them from remaking Murder, She Wrote because I just keep rewatching the show.
Any attempt to remake Murder, She Wrote is utter nonsense to me.
Utter nonsense.
I don't even understand.
There'd be no way. They did talk about it like a few years ago or something, but it never really got off the ground because how could it?
Well, this is what people tuned in for, obviously. We're
done talking about Carrie. It's not a good movie. Don't watch
Whatever. It. But both you and I have an affinity for old detective programming, of course.
Yes.
It's like a couple years ago, anyone who knew me knew how fucking irate I was about that Magnum PI remake. Because I'm just... But because all of those things, Murder, She Wrote, Magnum PI, Rockford Files, Columbo, whatever, these are shows based around the specific personalities of individual actors. The characters and the actors are basically the same thing. It's, because you just go like, well, what is Thomas Magnum? I was like, it's kind of just Tom Selleck. Like, I don't know.
It's kind of just Tom Selleck.
Yeah, and it's just the same thing with like Murder, She Wrote. That's Angela Lansbury. It's like Jessica Fletcher. Sure, has characteristics. That's why something I absolutely adored was Poker Face with Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah.
Where you're going
because you're taking that idea and drawing on referencing those things, but you're building it around Natasha Lyonne, who is very distinctive.
Exactly. That's because I remember there was that whole thing. It was like she should be Columbo. I'm like, no, she should just be
her own character.
Own thing. And it's exactly that. It's like what they did with Falk as Columbo, but they just did it with Natasha Lyonne as this character, and do more stuff like that. Take interesting, quirky people and put them in things. All right, we've solved TV. TV's fixed now.
TV's fixed.
Yeah.
Just keep doing that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so Carrie, it's forgotten, and that's deserved. It's not atrociously bad, but it's just so. I was left so, even more so than The Shining. It's shorter than that, but even still, The Shining has more reason to exist.
That and it definitely had some stuff to grab you.
No, there were moments in it. I think one of the biggest things, and I think if you go back to the episode, I think this is what my stance was like. If that had been 2 parts, it certainly would have been much more digestible. I think that stretched it out too much. This stretches out too much, but the more it stretches, the even more the even less there is. So yeah, and
I would recommend the Langoliers over this, but I do recommend the Langoliers generally, so it's not much of an.
Well, Langoliers is at least a thing. There's a reason to watch. All right, let's talk about some reactions to this because I think
I would love to hear. Did you even find a 10-star review of this?
Oh, I found a couple actually. Because I'm going to start with the 1 stars because it's basically what you would expect. This first review comes from Jan Wheel 3. And I love the title of this review. In a word, sucked. I personally am a huge fan of Stephen King. I own every book he's ever written or had anything to do with. That's... I just want to pause. That means like short story collections he like edited she might have or whatever.
Yeah.
Or he or they, I don't know. Jan Wheel could...
The book of weird gargoyle pictures they've mentioned on Just King things that he wrote like captions for.
Yeah. Anything with a foreword by Stephen King.
Yeah.
This has a poll quote. Sorry. For the most part, I am not a fan of his movies. I'd rather read the books and use my own imagination to play the movie in my head, so to speak. The whole reason I even started to read King books was because I saw Carrie 1976 on TV, and it scared the crap out of me and my mom. And she said, that's a book, and that's all it took. Ever since then, huge King fan right here. I watched this with an open mind, trying not to do well, that's not how it was in the original thing. For the most part, that worked. However, and that's 2 exclamation points on however.
Oh, good to know. Thank you.
I try to give it the proper. There are certain things you just can't ignore. Can you say cheesy special effects? ? Exclamation point. They were horrible, all caps. Not to mention the ending. What was that? 3 question marks. And I'm sorry, but no one can do Billy Nolan like John Travolta did. And Piper Laurie was much better as the psycho-religious mother. I was very disappointed and upset for missing other better shows to watch this piece of crap remake. There are just some things that are better left alone. Carrie, Psycho, Vertigo, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Nothing can beat the original.
Yeah.
By the way,
I like that mention of Friday the 13th because that remake they
that
did in the
movie,
early teens.
Yeah. Is it 09, 2010? Whatever it was.
It was so...
atrocious.
Atrocious.
Absolutely
because and so like poorly written that it implied that Jason was just a humble pot farmer in the woods, and the reason that he killed all those teens was because they were trying to steal his pot. So like that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Personally.
Okay. Okay, let's see, where is this here? I had these all, and then the computer crashed earlier, so, yeah. By the way, they are, Warner Brothers actually is talking about remaking Vertigo, which they need to stop. That needs to stop now. Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Mel Brooks already did that, and he called it High Anxiety, and it was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. Actually, there you go. It's it exactly. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. This comes from Tat Boy.
Tat Boy.
Got all them tats. All right. And this is pretty much what I expected a 10-star review of this to look like. Telling a great story well, ... Finally. In 1976, a classic psycho horror film was released that began or enhanced a number of Hollywood stars' careers. But the film hasn't aged that well over the years. Now, don't get me wrong, all the actors do a great job. The film work and production design is first rate. But this is a story about the daughter of a religious zealot who has almost occult powers of telekinesis. I'm not going to. And that from the day she's born. In 1976, without the help of computers, the filmmakers had to do the best they could to give the illusion of fidelity, I want to make that clear, to Stephen King's book without really being able to be truthful to the supernatural, or lack thereof, within that story.
Tat Boy, what are you talking about?
Now, finally, technology has caught up to this great story, exploring kids' inhumanity to kids. We can become fully immersed in this girl's world and her special abilities. We get to see all of them instead of just the most basic ones at the climax. And they are done incredibly well. You really believe this girl is doing all this with her mind. There's one other problem with the original. As great as it is, none of the actors portraying those high school kids were anywhere near high school age when the film was made. This longer version is more true to the original intent of the story for many reasons. One of the most important is having the kids portrayed by teenage actors. couple
it's
of
not
them.
true, Tat Boy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm going like, what are you watching? And you get a much more complex perspective of the mother and the relationship between Carrie and Margaret. And the updating of the story works beautifully. It's all much more believable and true to life. Just watch the scene at the pig farm. That Billy Nolan is damn scary. You would not want to be caught up in a fight with this guy. I actually found him much less intimidating than Travolta, but that's just my... all this to say, there's nothing more refreshing than telling a great story well. Telling it with as much respect for the source material as possible while making the story work for the particular medium and the particular time. Personally, I always thought it was an old-fashioned, cliched cop-out to have Carrie die at the end. It's much more realistic and interesting if she has to find some way to go on living with all that she's done. That's a much worse punishment than simply being executed by the storytellers. All in all, a great new version of this terrific, scary story. That was why I picked that one specifically for that last, because I'm like, he's going like, fidelity to the book, when he's like, I always thought it was dumb that Carrie died at the end, so I'm so glad they fixed that shit.
Like, Tat Boy, what?
All over the place. This review is all over the place.
Yeah.
Wow. And pretty much all the 10-star reviews take on something of like, finally everything from the book is in this.
Which, like, okay, I don't know if you read the book, but there's a lot of stuff missing too.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things, we talk about this a lot over on Meet the Monsters, because we do a lot of, Brendan and I are damn close to having seen every filmed version of Frankenstein and Dracula at this point. Mm-hmm. And we've seen many like TV movies, Masterpiece Theater, a lot of the sort of that really like word for word do the books, and they are often the most boring, uninteresting, because it's just like, who cares? Even Brendan, Mr. Faithfulness to Source Material, is like, yeah, but you still need like a take. Yeah,
like I feel like that happens with with Dracula a lot, because like weirdly in a similar vein, it also has a lot of epistolary stuff in it.
Yeah.
And like it would be interesting to see a take on that, but like I just like it just like how would you even go about doing it?
Actually, weirdly, Karen Kusama, who directed next week's movie, was for a while developing a Dracula movie at Universal, where the entire idea would be it would be perspectives on Dracula. We would hardly ever see the character, and it would be mostly about how people are reacting to him, trying to capture that. And you're like, that's an interesting exercise. Once again, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that fell apart because they're like, that's not a movie. Like, it's an interesting experiment to like try to write a movie like that. But I have to imagine, and I don't know that a studio exec would be like, yeah, but why would I want to pay to see that?
Yeah.
It's like...
It can be, adapting, telling stories visually.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
Sometimes.
It's really hard. And doing all the podcasts I've done over the last several years has really made that clearer than ever. It's really tough to I can't remember who I heard say this, but it's true. Getting any movie made is a miracle. That movie being good is an even bigger miracle. Like, that really is the thing. It's so hard to get anything made, and then to actually make it good, boy, you're shooting for the moon at that point. Because, good Lord, there's so many things standing in your way. So, all right. Well, like I said, Uncle Stevie's reaction to both of these was why they already did it perfectly. So,
yeah.
Once again, I always feel that when he says nothing about specific things, that speaks a lot.
It's so telling.
So we're jumping a full 11 years next week. And I keep saying Karen Kusama. I'm so sorry now that I look at this.
Oh my God.
It's not Karen Kusama. I'm a piece of shit. I'm a piece of shit. It's Kimberly Pierce. I'm sorry. It's another early 2000s feminist filmmaker. I'm a huge piece of shit.
Do all women just look the same to you, John? No,
I guess so.
Just giving you shit. But okay, so good to know. Kimberly Pierce.
Kimberly Pierce, who did Boys Don't Cry. Yeah, right. Instead of Karen Kusama, who did Girl Fight, which were both around the same time, Sundance breakout things. Anyway, Kimberly Pierce directed this. I do think, I have a feeling. I don't remember specifically, but I have a feeling that was probably used in the promotional thing, where it's like, well, we're going to get a woman to tell this story.
Yeah. Which again could be an interesting take.
Yeah.
Again, I say could have been. I haven't watched the movie either.
I don't know. Yeah, I avoid. I'm sure. I think you probably had a similar reaction to me, where I actively didn't see it because I was like,
yes.
Number one, why? Number two, this casting's a strange choice, and number three, the trailer didn't look good. It looked like it recycled a lot of the imagery, and I have seen the clip of her flying. So
yes,
and it is like, oh God, it's a CGI Chloe Grace Moretz, who once again, an insanely talented actress. But it's not at all what I envisioned. She actually would be who I would cast as Chris.
Yeah.
Much closer.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
She would be really good, I think, in that part. I'm very curious. A lot of good... It's a major movie. I mean, this is a big studio picture. So it's really interesting. It's kind of... I think we kind of lucked out doing these back-to-back, actually, because we're going to see sort of TV try to take a shot at it. And now we're going to see somebody try to turn into like a big summer tentpole movie. So what's that going to look like? But immediately, just looking at the poster for it going into next week, she's in the blood-soaked pink dress right on the cover, or right on the poster. And it is just kind of going like, you know what this is. It's just impossible.
Carrie. Come watch it. Give us your money.
It's just impossible. And actually... I did read about one other thing, which is at some point FX did try to develop a Carrie TV series again, like in the mid 2000 teens, and their big take was Carrie was going to be transgender, and you're like,
oh, I'm glad that, because listen, I love reimagining myself.
Yeah.
Love reimagining like classic characters as trans.
Sure.
I won't get on my trans Paul Atreides soapbox now, but just know that it exists. I can pull it out of the closet anytime. However, I don't trust studios.
No. The other thing about that is my initial, when I read that, I went, well, because the other thing is always my concern with, a studio creating quote-unquote representation in anything is it always comes off a little sincere or trendy. It often can, I should say.
Just look at the Heathers TV show.
Perfect. Yes. And that's the thing. But the other thing I thought about is aren't we now, isn't that a little like a hat on a hat a little bit too, where you're like, now you're making text, subtext, like that would be, it's a little bit like if you made, also all the mutants and X-Men are queer as well.
Yeah. Like,
and you're now you're making what this is, because the great thing about these things is they're very broadly focused and can stand in for a lot of stuff. Now it's like she's an outcast with telekinesis and weird religious stuff, and she's trans. Like, it's just like, I don't know. It just feels like that. It feels like an actually lazy decision as opposed to somebody developing. It's another thing where it's like, kind of like we were talking about with the detective shows, where it's like, take the themes of Carrie and then build a story that is born of the trans experience.
Yeah.
But instead, and that wasn't like somebody's pitch. That was the studio going, can we find someone to write trans Carrie? It's not like, I really have a passionate take on this. It would have been embarrassingly bad, and would have probably been more damaging for people than good.
Yeah.
But I did see that in the Wikipedia there and went, oh God, I immediately see what that show looks like, and yikes. So anyway, another bullet we dodged on a Carrie TV show. Also, just don't make a Carrie TV show. Who the fuck wants to watch that?
Just don't make a Carrie, like, what?
Yeah, let Carrie, why don't we just let Carrie go? Period.
Let Carrie die.
Yeah. Let her die.
Let her rest.
Yeah. Let the poor girl rest, for the love of God. Hasn't she been through enough, Hollywood? All right. Yeah. So that'll be next week of the show will be 2013's Carrie. Blissfully an hour 40 minutes, I now see here.
Ooh.
Oh, thank God. Yeah. Keep that going.
Delicious.
All right. But that is yes, that's gonna wrap up this week's investigation. Until next week, the case file is closed.
Hi. My name is Stephen King. I'm gonna scare the hell out of you, and that's a promise.